Hello, everyone. My name is Duque. I'm the director of the Division of Geriatric Medicine for McGill University, and also the director of the Center of Excellence for Sustainable Health of Seniors, Shuela C'est Durable. So it's a pleasure to welcome you to our joint grand rounds between the Division of Geriatric Medicine and Shuela C'est Durable. I just want to start by highlighting that we are located on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations, which we honor. We recognize and respect this nation as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we meet today. So for the activity today, we are divided in three sections. I will have a very short introduction about the Escuela C Durable and also our new DuraGym, and then we will listen to the talk from our distinguished international guest speaker, and then we will we're all invited to go downstairs and have a look at the lounge and the lounge of the gym, and have a look at our beautiful facilities for the DuraGym, and maybe enjoy some drinks and canapes, and do a lot of networking and interaction. So with that, I will just start with the very short introduction of our Center of Excellence, and I'm very proud also to show you the new logo of the Division of Geriatric Medicine at McGill University. I hope you like it. It's the one that says Division of Geriatric Medicine in English and French, just to give you an idea. This is a new logo for the division. And also, I just want to mention that our Center of Excellence, and that's something that we have shared in the past, but I wanted to highlight, is the vision of our Center of Excellence. We are not a Center of Excellence for research. We are Center of Excellence for knowledge mobilization and implementation. So our vision is that all seniors in the regions covered by the McGill-Ruiz benefit from services that allow them to enjoy positive aging, optimal health, and active life. So we, at our center, we look aging not something like something bad. We look something as an opportunity, and also healthy aging as one of our main objectives. And we are extremely thankful to the CEU's Center West and the Jewish General Hospital for hosting us here, the Center of Excellence, and for giving us a lot of support and assistance. Our mission, we have three components. One is translate evidence-based research into policy and practice. As I say, we don't generate research, we actually implement what people have already discovered and demonstrated that works. So we try to keep seniors mobile and enjoying life in the community, and we support, underpin, and disseminate programs that work. So we select programs that have demonstrated high level of effectiveness, and then we implement them in real life. So we have 4 programs or units that we call. One is the virtual care and supportive homes, the community liaison and education, the big data and predictive analysis to promote healthy aging, and the ones that is linking us today, which is the autonomy, mobility, and independence, which includes activities that promote physical activity and promote exercise, promote socialization, social activities, nutrition, healthy aging through effective interventions that improve the quality of life of our older persons in the community. So what was the rationale to create these DuraGyms? I think that for those of you who work in the hospital, we are aware of this. I don't have to repeat this all the time. The approximately 1/3 of older patients experience functional deterioration at discharge compared to the condition before admission into the hospital. And because that happens, I always give the same example of a person who had a hip fracture. We provide the best care for that person here at the hospital. They probably move into a rehab hospital for another 6 weeks or 12 weeks, who knows, and then the patient is discharged. And at the moment they are discharged, they recommend, okay, Mr. Jones, it's time for you to go to do exercise in the community. And but then Mr. Jones is never followed, is never contacted by the CLSC, is probably lives alone, probably not motivated, and Mr. Jones remains watching TV the whole day at home, deconditioning even worse. And those are the patients, and that's what I want to highlight here in the figure that you see on your left, is these patients who experience that functional decline sooner or later. Those are the patients who will come back to our hospital through emergency. So what can we do to break that cycle? How can we help Mr. Jones between the moment they are discharged from physio, from the very effective physiotherapy? How can we assure that the patient will continue doing exercise and physical activity? How can we assure that? Well, we need an intermediate restorative kind of setting, and that's what was the rationale to develop and it was inspired in a program that we developed in Australia. I was in Australia for 15 years, and we implemented something that we used to call DuraGym, gait and balance gyms. We created the gait and balance gyms, and these are pictures of real patients doing real exercise, Australian older persons who were in the post-hip fracture program, and they were doing exercises at the gait and balance gym. So you will ask me, how different is this from, I don't know, one of the gyms here, Nautilus, where people can go and do exercise? Well, it's very different. How different is this from the Cummins Center? And my answer is, it's very different. And it's very different because it's for people who are still have certain level of the conditioning. So if people cannot go and do exercises in a regular exercise program, they cannot go to the usual YMCA. They still need something, but they don't need to be one-to-one. And that's the big difference. So they don't have to be intensively observed and supervised, but they cannot be in front of a screen doing online training. They still have needs. And to cover those needs, these are the components of the DuraGym. Supervised exercise by a kinesiologist. So it's not at the level of the requirements and functional requirements that they need a physiotherapy, intensive physiotherapy intervention. So they can still have modified or Otago protocol, and I will not talk about Otago because one of the creators of the Otago is here with us, so I will not go into those details. And then we have resistance training, additional to that, balance exercises, and two components that we think are essential in the rehabilitation and the encouraging and adherence of people, older persons, to exercise. One is nutrition. If we don't combine the nutritional component with the exercise, the effectiveness is not going to be the same. And the second one, socialization. And they need to have peers. They have to sit down with other friends, make friends. And you will be surprised, in the GABA gym in Australia, we used to have actually what we used to call the bar. So don't take me wrong, they were not drinking alcohol, and that bar, no, they were not drinking alcohol, but they were drinking protein supplements at the end of the sessions. So we have tables. It was the bar. We had a label as the bar. They sit down, they drink their protein supplements, and they start chatting. And you will be surprised that sometimes we wanted to enter the next group and they didn't want to leave. They wanted to stay there. So at the end, we decided to allow it in a very flexible way and say, okay, we don't, even if there is overlap between the groups, because every group is composed of 5 participants. 5 participants per health professional. So if we have 2 kinesiologists, of course, we can have 10 patients at the same time, but it depends also space and resources. So what is the program about? It's 14 sessions, 2 sessions a week. One session is as an assessment of the needs and potential to actually improve and it's also establishing some unification. So we cannot have groups of people with too many different levels of function or needs, because then you will have confusing interventions. So we will try to have a homogeneous kind of people within the same group of needs. Then we have 12 sessions. So they will have 12 sessions. That includes the protocol that is shown above. And then they will have one final session where they are prepared for the next step. And the next step is has demonstrated, and I will not go into all the evidence because we have our speaker here, but it has demonstrated that when they participate in these sessions, they have the motivation to continue. Adherence in the future to community exercise programs increases if they have participated in the DuraGym program. And guess how much was the adherence to the DuraGym, to the GABA-gym program in Australia? I guess 92%. So 92% of them, participants, finished the whole set of 14 interventions. You knew the answer because we have talked about it before. Okay. Okay. And the two final components I would like to highlight are the component of research. So we are going to also profit from those fantastic facilities to do clinical trials. And finally, education. We have already arranged with McGill University and with UCAM. We are going to have their students, kinesiology students, helping us. We will have internships, and we are also in conversations with physical therapy that are also interested, because this is not excluding physical therapy. This is actually integrating the program within a continuum. How are we planning to integrate that continuum? And don't worry, this is almost my last slide. So after they finish the program, the 14 sessions, they can go home and they start doing exercises at home, or they participate in exercise programs in the community. And this is an example of the exercise program at home that we have implemented all over McGill. That is called the BB-Frail. We did the launching of the BB-Frail last April. And this is an exercise program that the patients do and develop at home without supervision. So this is the continuation. We don't want them to lose that continuity. And why we don't want to lose that continuity? Because this is actually fitting very well. I don't know, you have vous avez déjà vu la fierté de vieillir, le programme du ministère de Santé de Québec. And this program, la fierté de vieillir, has several axes. And interestingly, and this is basically the policy for the future of the aging care in Quebec. It's called La Fierté de Vieillir. And our program fits perfectly on AX 5. So which is intervention, which is promoting independence, doing exercise, socializing, providing nutritional support, and providing nutritional education. So this is not a program that came out from the moon. This is a program that has evidence-based, World Health Organization endorsement, and attached to the policies in Quebec for the healthy aging of Quebecers. So, as I said, where do we see this program situated, the DuraGyms? You will see in this pyramid the needs of our older population. I will not go into all the details, but it goes from the red, the top red, are those who are a high need, the very frail, poor mobility, lots of needs. Some of them come very often to emergency. And that's where we can offer not only of course, those patients require physiotherapy. That's no doubt. We are not going to replace the physiotherapy. But then after they finish the physiotherapy, we can integrate the DuraGym as the second step. After they finish the DuraGym, they can go into the BB-Frail program. And you will see that every level will need different interventions. But the DuraGym probably will cover those top two, the ones with the highest level of needs. So this is how we fit, and we think the DuraGym fits, within all this health system and the policy for older persons in Quebec. This is not primary prevention first. This is secondary or tertiary prevention. We are not doing primary prevention here. These are people who already had a condition, already are frail, already demand care, and they already had comorbidities. So we are intervening at that level. So we are not doing primary health, but we are coordinating it with the primary health system in a way that we can integrate them back and forth. And especially to the top ones who are the most expensive for the health system and have the higher level of needs. So with this, I would like, before we move to our speaker, I would like to thank a few people here, and I apologize if um, I'm missing some people, but I would like to highlight the people who have supported this program from the beginning. I would like to start by thanking the Shuela family, who is supporting our Center of Excellence. Very much appreciated. I would like to thank very, very especially our divisional director, Dr. Ruby Friedman, because he has been supporting this program from the beginning, from resources, support, space, encouragement. I would like to also to thank the leaders of the CEUs, particularly Dr. Rosenberg, Erin Cook, and all the people who are presenting here, the CEUs, because they give us lots of support, lots of recognition. So it's very much appreciated. And that's something that helped us to connect not only with the health system, but also with the university. The foundation, Bram Friedman, and the people who have coordinated the funding of our program, and the group from multidisciplinary teams here, and the CEOs, Suzanne Leroux, Lynn Gillespie, and the team in physiotherapy. They have been consultants for us because not every GABA gym or DuraGym is going to be the same, and we needed their input to create the ones here in Quebec. The nurses at the clinic, Rita and Alex, Elizabeth Giacono, who has been helping us a lot. People from kinesiology at McGill, Tyler Church, and the group there, and maintenance and facilities management here at the CEUs, who have been very quick on fixing the facilities and making it beautiful in the way that you are going to see afterwards. And finally, very special thanks to our team at C'est Durable, to Andrea, and particularly to Hussein Samhat, who has been the leader and who has been the champion of this program. Thank you very much. I wanted to give the thanks at this moment with this opportunity when everybody's with a high level of attention, because thank you very much for all you have done and all the support that you have given us. So with this, I would like to introduce my very good friend, Debra Waters, Professor Debra Waters. I know Debra for many years, I think. We have traveled a while. And Debra is a professor of medicine at both Dunedin, University of Dunedin and New Zealand, and the University of New Mexico. I just want, her CV is very long, but I just want to summarize in the most important points. One is Debra has been a leader in testing exercise interventions for older persons. She has been part of several big cohort studies, and most importantly, the New Mexico longitudinal study on aging, where she was the leader, so the leading investigators, and then she participated in the development of the Otago protocol, which we are going to implement in here at our DuraGym for our patients. Debra has been also the author of many publications. She belongs to several international consortia, and I think that for us it's an honor and a pleasure to have Debra with us today to listen about all this, the effectiveness and how to implement these programs and to make them work in other persons. So please join me in welcoming Debra to Montreal, and to McGill, and to the CEUs.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Gustavo. We have known each other for a long time, and I really can't thank him enough for the invitation to come here today. I'm sure all the people that he just thanked were somewhat behind some of the opportunity for me to come here from the US, not from New Zealand. I happened to split my time and I was in the US, so I've come from New Mexico to Montreal. So I want to spend a bit of time today just going through, they asked me to talk about evidence-based, and so I'm going to just go through some kind of an overview of what I'd like to cover with you so you have a better understanding of kind of the language that I'll be using while I talk about these topics. So first of all, we'll talk about changes in functional capacity, just briefly, that happens with aging, a little bit about frailty and how we're starting to move away from deficit language and thinking to try to make it a little bit more positive. Then I'll move into some evidence-based exercise programs. I'll talk specifically about the Otago exercise program, which I've been very involved with for a number of years. And as part of that, some alternative delivery models that are really quite exciting that I think might have some relevance to what's going on here. Then a bit of a conclusion, and then leave some time for discussion. So mobility loss in older adults is really a hallmark of functional aging. And it happens because of a lot of things that change in the aging body. So there's changes in the central nervous system, muscles, joints, energetics, how the body can supply energy for these movements, and also sensory systems such as vision and hearing. So this decline in mobility becomes more evident in adulthood, and it's really only when you challenge it. So we actually can see changes in gait speed from younger ages, even from 40 to 50, if you challenge that person with a fast walking test, rather than what we talk as a normal gait speed, which normally you won't see changes in that until a bit little later in life. And this is a nice schematic. It's a little hard to see, but I'll walk you through it. So that top frame is a 4-meter usual gait speed in men on the left and women on the right. And you can see if you follow that straight line across, that there's a change that happens at about the age of 50 in men and women in that usual gait speed. I'm sorry, in that that happens a bit when it comes off that in that usual gait speed. At fast gait speed, you can see it shifts earlier. So that's why we need to do different tests if we want to show these kind of deficits in younger people compared to older people. And so, and alongside this, changes in gait speed, we know there's changes in muscle mass and strength across the lifespan. So you can see that early life, we're maximizing, so up to the age of around 20 to 30, we can see maximizing that muscle mass and also our bone mass. It's really important to reach those maximum kinds of muscle mass and bone mass, because then in adult life, it starts to deteriorate and we start to lose that muscle and bone mass. And the top line is showing someone that's probably doing strength training or doing things to preserve that peak achievement of muscle mass and bone mass in their lifetime, versus the lower line, which is showing someone that's probably not doing much, more sedentary, and is going to be on a much faster trajectory down to disability earlier in life. And this slide shows just all the things that are happening, particularly in the skeletal muscle system, that kind of drives some of these changes that we see, particularly in muscle mass and strength, which is so critical for functional capacity and mobility. So we see decreases in the size and the length of the actual muscle fibers in skeletal muscle. We see a loss in type 2 fibers, and type 2 fibers are what we call the powerful fibers. They're kind of what are the fast twitch. So things that are really fast movements or strong movements are done by these. Those are the fibers that actually decline in size and number faster as we age, and driving that sarcopenia process. The muscle also becomes resistant to anabolic signals from both exercise and protein intake. So it doesn't respond the way a younger muscle does. You see a change in the way that the tendon and the muscle insert on the bone, and that changes the way the muscle can exert force. There's lower energy available through mitochondria, both mitochondrial functioning and number. And you also see changes in kind of the innervation, or what causes the muscle to contract, and those what's called neuromuscular junctions actually start to decrease. So there's lots of things that are contributing to this change in muscle function as we age, which ends up, decreasing the size of the muscle and also the function of the muscle over time. So we think about frailty, and we think about what frailty might look like. When you say, oh, that person's frail, you kind of get an image in your head, don't you, what that person might look like. It might look like the woman on the left. Probably doesn't it would bring you an image of the person in the middle doing the little jig. And then there's a person on the right. And often we don't think about people who are heavier as being frail, but they certainly can have low lean body mass and high fat, what we call sarcopenic obese. And their function, we know, is much less than people who have normal lean body mass as they age. So frailty as a definition is usually stated as a state of increased vulnerability to adverse health outcomes due to a decline in multiple physiological systems. So this term kind of appeared in the 70s and 80s in the geriatric literature, and it is used interchangeably with the failure to thrive and also associated with high levels of nursing care home. In the 80s, this is again linked more with disability and comorbidities and used to identify vulnerable older adults. And then in 2001, Linda Fried and Jeremy Walston, who unfortunately passed away quite untimely earlier this year, developed a model looking at frailty as a clinical syndrome or frailty phenotype. And it was based on 5 criteria: unintentional weight loss, grip strength, slow walking speed, self-reported exhaustion, and low physical activity. So it was a mixture of what we call objective and subjective measures, by asking people if they get really tired when they're doing things versus measuring a grip strength. So it had a mixture of objective and subjective. This is still widely used to measure frailty in older adults. And certainly it really focuses on functional frailty rather than other aspects of frailty, such as cognitive frailty and social frailty. Concurrently, researchers in Canada, Kenneth Rockwood and Arnold Manitsky, were also putting forward ways in which we can identify people who might be frail. And they looked at what was called a cumulative deficit theory and developed this frailty index. And it had over 70 different markers of things that could be identified as deficits in someone's health. And it was not like a kind of more comprehensive geriatric assessment, but people found it a bit hard to use, even though it was valid and it was a reliable measure. So it was less widely used than the figure that you see on the right, which is their clinical frailty scale, which actually is a nice visual for people in a clinic to look at people and think, okay, where does this patient of mine actually fit on this scale? So that's really more widely used than the cumulative deficit theory at the moment. And I put this in here because this was a commentary by Jean Wu. She's a geriatrician in Singapore and quite widely known in frailty research. And this was a commentary, and I'll talk about this study a little bit later, on a super trial, which was a trial that was conducted in New Zealand. And she said falls are a downstream consequence of frailty, and certainly falls and falls prevention is part of the clinic's goals to help decrease the people's risk of falls when they become more frail. And this is because accidents are the 5th leading cause of death in older adults, and falls account for 2/3 of these accidental deaths. So it's a huge problem for older adults to be falling and having these bad outcomes. 1/3 of adults over 65 living in the community fall at least once a year, and it goes up to half once they get over the age of 80. 5% of these falls will result in a fracture or hospitalization, and often people who end up in those situations do not come back to their former level of functioning after they've had something where they end up in hospital with a hip fracture in particular. And again, back to mobility abnormalities are affecting a high proportion of these people, up to 40% of adults over the age of 65 and over 50% of people over 85. So it's important that we address these things because we want to make sure that we keep people upright and standing. Because as you know from Dr. Duquet's talks, people become osteoporotic as they age, but if they don't fall down, they're less likely to fracture a hip and have these kind of poor health outcomes. So when we're thinking about back to shifting of frailty and why we're talking about kind of these interventions to decrease frailty and increase intrinsic capacity. And this is a new kind of newer terminology that came out not that long ago, 2015. The WHO, under John Beard, who was in Australia at the time, came up with this idea around frailty as thinking more of what people can do rather than what people can't do, to try to put a little bit more positive thinking around what people's capacities are rather than their deficits. So the intrinsic capacity is an individual's physical and mental capacity. So it's not just focused on function. So it's locomotion, cognition, psychological well-being, which is often measured as a measure of depression, sensory function, which is vision and hearing, and vitality, which is nutrition. So those are the main components that make up intrinsic capacity. So it was the hope to reframe aging to be a little bit more inclusive and positive, focusing on preservation, so what we're talking about, prevention, and optimization of people's abilities, rather than only managing their decline. It was also meant to be used to identify people who are not yet clinically frail, so catching people earlier, again, with the idea of prevention. So it's a complementary approach, with frailty representing a state of significantly reduced intrinsic capacity, hopefully that we can intervene sooner. Now they just came out with the second edition in early 2025 of the ICOPE model. And you can see in this this schematic right here, where it talks about cognitive decline and loss of mobility, malnutrition, vision, hearing, and depression, those six components that I just described. They added social care and support, carer support, and urinary incontinence. So these are all going to be captured now in people who are who are actually trying to integrate this ICOPE model into different cities. And we're doing this as the first in the US and Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're developing this with the Healthcare Authority. Medicare or Medicaid is funding some of that work currently. And I know it's also happening here in Quebec, that you're getting the ICOPE model more integrated into people's care as they age. And I think it's a great direction to go. Hopefully when we screen people earlier, we pick up these deficits and we keep their intrinsic capacity higher for longer. Now, what I was asked to talk about is evidence-based exercise programs. And you say, oh my goodness, this looks like the diagram Dr. Duque just showed. Well, it's not exactly, because this one's going from the bottom up. And the reason I wanted to show this slide was because we use this term evidence-based, and what does it really mean? What does evidence-based mean? And where does that evidence come from? What kind of evidence do we really think about? Well, if you look at those top four rows, starting from randomized controlled trials, critically applied sources, systematic reviews, and meta-analysis, when you're a researcher like myself and other people in this room, you think about quality of research design, and you try to do high quality research design, and usually randomized controlled trials are considered that kind of high standard where you're randomly allocating people to things. The systematic reviews and meta-analysis are taking all those randomized controlled trials under strict criteria and trying to pool all that data and see if they can answer the same question or a research question with a much bigger sample size. So those are important kinds of studies, and we often go back to the systematic reviews and meta-analysis to try to answer these questions that are being answered individually by randomized controlled trials. But they're not perfect. The systematic reviews and meta-analysis often are at the mercy of how well these trials are conducted, and they often are using what we call too much heterogeneity. They're too different from each other to really compare. So they're good, but they do have their limitations. All right, go ahead, forward, there we go. So examples of evidence-based exercise programs, and this is not at all an inclusive list, but these are the ones that I wanted to just touch on because you've heard of the framework, which the WHO is using as part of this ICOPE initiative. We've got the Otago exercise program, which I'll talk about in more detail in a moment. Steady as you go, which is another component of the Otago exercise program that I've been heavily involved with. That is actually a community-based Otago exercise program. Tai Chi, which many will have heard about, that's also been used as a good falls prevention with good evidence. On the Move is a US-based program that's designed to target key principles, again, trying to prevent falls and looking at the motor control of walking. And Silver Sneakers, which is something that we have in the US that's specific to how the US insurance system works. So people who have Medicare and certain types of Medicare insurance coverage are eligible to go to gyms that offer these classes at a discount or for free. And they also have online classes. So those are kind of some, just an overview, very brief overview of those kinds of evidence-based programs that were probably more widely known than some others. So this was a paper that came out, and Gustavo Duque is on this as well as myself. This is the ICFSR task force that's been going for quite a number of years. And it was led by Miquel Escudero, and he is based in Spain. And it was quite a big effort to put this general exercise prescription principles together. But I did want to go through it just very briefly, and hold your breath because the next slide is really busy and it's going to be hard to read. So I'll walk you through it because I thought it was important that I at least walk you through some of the terminology around exercise prescription before I just start talking about that. Get that thing. Go forward. Come on. Here we go. All right. So I won't go through everything, every element of this, but when we talk about training modalities, what do we mean by training modalities? So we've got different ways in which we do things. We've got aerobic training, we've got resistance training. So those kinds of things are actually training modalities. What kind of things are you going to be doing to have people incorporate strength, power, or gait training? Power training. I'm sure some of you heard about power training. Well, what does that mean? It's a type of resistance training, but it's done with heavier weights, with a fast contraction up and a slow contraction down. It does get those type 2 fibers that I mentioned earlier to contract more readily than some lighter weights and slower contractions. Resistance training, weight training. Okay, that's a modality of type of training. That's what we use to build strength and muscle mass. We start with things that called a 1 RM, 1 repetition max. Heavier loads would be considered 70 to 80% of a 1 repetition max, meaning that's the most you could lift, would be a 1 repetition max, so almost 8% at that. So you're building after that. Sets, repetitions, rest intervals. So every time you move the movement, you're doing a repetition. Each movement is a repetition. If you do 10 repetitions, that's set. And then you've got your sets of intervals that you space with rest in between those and within an exercise session, and then you exercise rest between your exercise sessions. We've got different kinds of resistance training, and you'll see that down in the DuraGym. Some of it's with resistance equipment. Okay, so you've got machines, weight machines. You can use body weight. You can use a combination of things. How you do the movements makes a difference. How the muscle responds. If I do things with both my arms, responds differently than I do it with one arm. Takes more effort to do it with one arm than it does with both. So there's all sorts of nuances for how we actually do exercise prescription. Of course, balance exercise are key to keeping people up on their feet and keep them from falling. That's Tai Chi, yoga, standing on one leg, stepping over objects, and dance. Gait exercises, which of course is important, where you're walking and making sure people have some walking, and that's included in the Otago exercise program, where people are doing figure eights and they might be walking around obstacles to make sure they keep their gait intact. Aerobic training is what most people think about when we say, what are the recommendations for exercise for older adults? Oh, go out and walk 5 times a week, 30 minutes a day. That's what people think about, and they don't remember about the resistance part of it, but that's an important component. And then things that you want to consider would be cognitive impairments, medication, and improved adherence. Now, this same article has some really nice schematics, and if you're interested in this field, I would highly recommend you look at this, because this actually, I think, summarizes very nice how we need to think about prescription, particularly when we have more functional limitations. So if you look at the far right-hand side of that schematic, so you've got frailty, sarcopenia, comorbidities. What the recommendation is for people who are a little less able-bodied, you really want to focus more on the PRT, progressive resistance training. That's the weightlifting. balance, and gait, and less so on cardiovascular improvements. Okay, once you get them strong and steady on their feet, you can start doing more of that. But really, you want to be doing functional exercises with people and making sure they're safe to go out and walk before you put them in those kinds of programs. And the other thing that this article has that's really quite nice, this is one of like 3 different schematics that different people who prescribe these programs need to think about, is what is the role of different medications and people's tolerance for exercise. So you might have a client or a patient that's taking opioids or sleeping pills to help them sleep. Well, they're going to have possibly some sedation from that, or they might be a little bit fuzzy in their thinking. So you want to make sure that the timing of when they're taking those things is not close to when you're trying to have them do some exercise. Same with any kind of sedating measures, things. Statins can cause muscle soreness that's unrelated to exercise. You want to make sure you are giving them an opportunity to explain what this muscle soreness is that they're experiencing. Is it muscle soreness from the actual exercise, or is it coming from the statins? People who are on beta blockers, their heart rate won't come up normally in response to exercise. So you want to make sure they're using what we call ratings of perceived exertion. How hard does this exercise feel to you? Because it is, when the heart rate can't come up, it's going to feel much harder for potentially a lower level of exercise than someone who isn't on a beta blocker. And then metformins and corticosteroids change the actual metabolism in the muscle and kind of counteracts some of what's happening when you exercise a muscle. It actually has to work harder to get the same effect from that exercise because it's the same metabolic pathways that are being used. So lots of nuances that I could give a whole talk, and I have, on just those kinds of issues. So it's really, it just kind of gets the point home that exercise prescription is not simple or kind of easy to just kind of put out there. You've heard about Vivitrol, and it's been shown with different research projects to be effective for improving both physical function, like the short physical performance battery test, muscle strength, particularly hand grip strength, cognitive functioning, and reducing the risk of falls. And I like it, and Dr. Duque did show you this slide already about the passport approach, which is a very nice approach. I think it's very individualized. People can write their own things in these own passports. So that's going to be a very nice step with when people go from the gym to their own personal home-based exercise. It's a really, really good program, and it is evidence-based. So the WHO has endorsed this as part of their ICOPE guidelines, particularly for people with mobility limitations. There's been clinical trials on this, one smaller one that showed frail and pre-frail older adults significantly improved their functional capacity compared to just standard of care. And a meta-analysis that was out recently showed significant improvements in both physical and cognitive function in frail older adults. Otago exercise program. This is what's come out of New Zealand. So this was actually started to be developed in the mid-1990s. So it's been around for quite a while. Professor John Campbell, who has passed away, unfortunately, and Dr. Claire Robertson started this. They were at the Department of Medicine originally at the School of Medicine in the University of Otago in Dunedin, New Zealand, which is way in the south of the South Island. And there was a New Zealand Falls Prevention Group that was part of this. That's now the Australian-New Zealand Falls Prevention Society, Department of Medicine and School of Physiotherapy, which I've been part of for the last 20 years. So their initial work was really to try to identify. They spent years identifying risk factors for falls, poor balance, muscle weakness, slow reaction times. Then they did quite a few studies within New Zealand that were really quite rigorous to try to see how much did this decrease falls incidence in older people. And some of their earlier studies showed it decreased falls incidence, how often people were falling, by 46%. So pretty significant decrease. So who is this program targeted to? It's targeted actually to people 80 and over who have moderate to severe moderate strength and balance deficits, but they're still living in their own home. They're able to walk independently, either with or without a walking aid. It's in-home, delivered by a physical therapist. And it's tailored. So each person gets a tailored prescription for them based on their own baseline strength. They get a walking program. It's progressive exercises over 12 months. They get 7 visits, and there's 3 kind of close succession in that first month. And then it's spread out more over the period of that year, but they get phone follow-ups over that time. There has been this initial meta-analysis that'll have 1,000 participants in it that showed, rather than 46 for those community dwelling kind of people, rather than the high-end, higher risk, 35% reduction in falls. That's still a big reduction, and 35% reduction in falls related injuries. And then they also showed that the reason this was happening because their timed up and go, their ability to stand up out of a chair and walk around a cone and sit down was improved. Their step test, which is a dynamic dynamic balance test, and sit to stand, all improved. Kathy Sherrington, who's based in Australia, and she's a big falls researcher, did a really nice meta-analysis that was published in 2020. It was kind of an update on a Cochrane review that they had done, and showed, looking at all the evidence around exercise, not just the Otago exercise program, but what kinds of exercises. And it said all types of exercises reduce the rates of falls by about 23%. And this was big numbers, 14,000 participants. So this is what I'm talking about, where you're combining all these studies and getting these big numbers to be able to answer some questions. And so they had a high level of certainty, which they said, we were able to compare these studies, and that's good level of evidence. The falls rate was decreased by 24% through balance and functional exercises, 23% through Tai Chi, and 28% through balance and functional exercises that had resistance exercise with it. They couldn't see clear evidence for purely dance or purely walking, which makes sense when you think about what you're trying to do with strength as well as balance. And then they did some of these subgroup analysis to see if there was anything, and there was no difference between delivering this as a group or individually, or interventions that were delivered by health professionals versus other trained other trained leaders. So, as you know, Otago exercise program is everywhere. I got sent a picture from our Pro Vice Chancellor Health Sciences while she was on sabbatical up in a tiny little village in the UK, at the northernmost end of the UK. And it was an Otago exercise program brochure pamphlet. And she said, oh my gosh, this is impact when you've got that kind of reach. The CDC also used this when they developed their own study tools for falls prevention. And there's new applications looking at, using this in people with severe arthritis and other kinds of conditions like cognitive impairment. And what I'll talk about next is how we are looking at this with alternative modes of delivery rather than one-on-one kinds of delivery as the Otago exercise program was originally developed. And that brings me to Steady As You Go. And anybody who knows me from New Zealand will say, oh, here she goes again, talking about Steady As You Go. And it's because it's such an incredible model, I think. So this was developed by Age Concern Otago, which is a charitable organization around New Zealand. Otago is a specific region, but they're all over, and they deliver services to older adults in New Zealand. University of Otago School of Physiotherapy, and the Accident Compensation Corporation. The insurance situation in New Zealand is quite unique. ACC, Accident Compensation Corporation, just deals with accidents. So if you came to visit New Zealand and you fell down in the street and you broke your leg, you would be taken care of by this program. Okay, no cost to you. It's paid for all sorts of levies on gasoline and food and everything across the country, but that's what they do. So they are interested in falls, and they don't want to have falls. So they were interested in this program. So this was adapted from the original Otago exercise program, and it was actually one of the people who worked for ACC who came up with this idea of a peer-led model. So how it works is people are put into 10-week classes that are led by a trained professional. So they do once a week, coming together, doing 45 minutes of exercise with some falls prevention education. In the first, and this has changed, we used to say, wait until the classes are almost done, and then we'd say, okay, who wants to be the peer leaders and who wants to be trained? And people would be like, I don't know. So we started doing it the first week. The classes got together and said, hey, we really want this class to become peer-led. You folks, you people who are in this 10-week class will take this class and lead it. And that worked really well. So they started training the trainer. So that was where these peer leaders were being trained by other trainers. And other class members have specific roles. And that was a big game changer. It wasn't just the peer leaders leading the class, it was the class taking ownership of how that class ran. Where are we going to have our class? What day of the week? What time? What church hall should we have it in? Who's going to take attendance? Who's going to take the gold coin donation? Who's going to call people who haven't shown up for two weeks and we don't know if they're okay? So a very different model of delivery and really works well. So the class sizes aren't very big, usually keep it to about 15, 1 to 2 leaders, peer leaders per class. They have a CD that they follow. Okay, so that's what they have. It has music and there's 4 CDs. So there's levels of progression that they can work through. And our evaluation found that there was a 27% reduction in falls in people who attended this class. So we were very excited about that. ACC got excited. And then later on, I'll talk about the super trial that we did, looking at whether or not this could reduce frailty. So again, the most successful aspect of Steady As You Go is this peer-led. And it came from Age Concern and ACC having a belief in older adults, saying we can empower people to take these classes. We believe they can do it. Well, not only can I believe it, it's been going for 20 years and it's had huge uptake. And now Age Concern New Zealand, which is the national body, is rolling it out nationally because they said this program works. We've got the evidence base to show that it really works. And if you look up my name, you'll see all the different studies that we've done on this. So there's lots of people. This is a lot of people for New Zealand. Okay, it doesn't mean that's not a lot for Canada, but it is actually quite significant for New Zealand. And this was the evaluation that we did, that it took me 1.5 years to convince ACC to fund. It was a quasi-experimental. So that yellow line on top was actually people who are already in the Steady As You Go classes. So you can see their function is higher than everybody else. So we had to adjust for that. The yellow, or the red line was the new people who had never been exposed to the Steady As You Go class. And you can see how their function improved from that baseline to 10 weeks, significantly improved. So their 30-second chair stand improved, their step touch improved, other functional measures all improved in that 10-week period. And then they maintained that. We followed them for over a year and also tracked falls through falls calendar. So we had monthly falls calendar so we could see who was having falls. And that's when we found that we had this 27% reduction, as well as these improvements in strength and balance. So that was kind of our first strong bit of evidence. The other thing is the social benefits. And Dr. Duque alluded to this, and we have good evidence to show that this is key to keeping people coming back to these kinds of classes. So this was qualitative research that was done by a couple of my colleagues as part of that evaluation. And it was, people have made comments like arranging transport, walking groups with other, meeting for tea afterwards. So people choose where they want their venues, and then they walk there together, they figure out the transport themselves. For some people, it was the only contact they had with other people all week. So they found the companionship was really good. They meet people. We've had marriages. So, it definitely has value. It's an outing. It's a new circle of friends. And the peer leaders are the glue that keeps them together. So the value of the peer leaders was really part of why these people came back. They would tell the peer leaders, I'm not going to be here the next 2 weeks, so they wouldn't get a phone call saying, are you okay? So yeah, so the peer leader model, I think, is really, really quite unique and quite effective. I had a master's student, because I was quite interested, how hard it is to get things funded long-term. I was really curious, and I wanted to, because ACC was only funding 10-week classes, and then they said that you're on your own. So I wanted to show that hopefully we could show that long-term participation in these classes was really effective for decreasing injuries and also falls incidents. So this master's student, we followed 207 Steady As You Go participants over 12 months. So this was an observational cohort study. We collected falls calendars, we collected attendance, and then we looked at doing an analysis where we took into account age, sex, number of medications, how many months they were actually in the follow-up, to determine if Steady As You Go, if the longer you were in Steady As You Go, you had fewer falls over that 12-month period. And lo and behold, not surprising, we did find that. But again, you say, well, that makes sense, but that's not enough to convince people to fund programs. You have to have hard evidence. So we had the hard evidence showing that 3 years or more seemed to be the magic number for people to have lower a number of falls in that 12-month period. Super trial. This was a large multi-centered randomized controlled trial that we did that was in the lower part of the South Island, lower than Dunedin, in a city called Invercargill, and also in 3 towns in the North Island, Whangarei, Hawick, and Tauranga. And we wanted to get 500 pre-frail community dwelling older adults randomized into a 2x2 factorial design, which I'll explain in a minute. So we had group sessions that met weekly for 6, and they were followed up at 6, 12, and 24 months, and they had monthly falls calendars. We assessed a huge number of people. 2,678 people got mailed a screening, a frailty screening, the frail scale, and some of those you'll know what that scale is. And out of that, we got 468 people. So we screened a huge number of people to get not quite the 500 we were hoping. 59% were female. They were older. They were 80 plus. And then we did the Fried scale, the Fried phenotype scale that I described to you earlier that had those 5 different measures in it. And we found actually that people were frail, okay? And we were hoping to get them when they were pre-frail. So some were kind of overestimating their abilities, and that's male in screening. And then we randomized them to Senior Chef, which is another program that was developed in New Zealand, where people actually come together, learn about nutrition, learn about grocery shopping, have recipes, cook a meal together, and eat it together. Okay, so it's quite an interesting intervention. And Steady As You Go with the Sago, combination of the Senior Chef and Sago, and a control group which came to the age concern facilities and did crafts for the same amount of time that the other groups were meeting. And you say, wow, that's an interesting looking graph. And it is. So the orange line, that top square on the slide, in that gray bar, so that all the interventions were 10 weeks, but we followed them for 2 years. So that orange bar shows you that was the Steady As You Go group alone. So they started, so all these had slightly different frailty measures in the beginning, so that they were actually more frail. Their score was higher to start out with, but you statistically adjust for that when you would do it. And what we found was that people who were in the Steady As You Go group had the largest change and decrease in their frailty score over a 6-month follow-up compared to the control group. And you can see it kind of jumped around, and then you say, wow, what happened at the end out at that 2-year time? Well, unfortunately, most of these groups did not go into a peer-led model. Okay, that's what we had hoped for, but it wasn't organized as we had hoped it would be, like it is doing now in the Otago region across New Zealand. But we did see that actually they did show a decrease in markers of frailty from the Steady As You Go extra intervention. Another adaptation to doing the Otago exercise program is I've done some work with tribal communities, both in New Mexico and in New Zealand. And this is a study that we just recently completed. We're in our 5th year. It's a 5-year randomized controlled trial done in a tribe that's out in the very northwestern part of New Mexico, almost on the Arizona border. Very geographically isolated tribe. They have their own pueblo. They're a large pueblo, and they've been very involved with trying to manage their health for a long time. And the tribal leadership came to Raj Shah, who is the primary investigator, and said, we've got a real problem with falls in our community. Can you help us? He was already doing some work with them on diabetes and kidney disease and cancer. So they said, this is an issue for our people. How can you help us? So we fostered this collaborative relationship with the Zuni leadership, with their stakeholders, UNM's health sciences, to help develop a falls prevention program that would work for them. We knew we'd have to culturally adapt it for it to be successful. And we wanted to use community health representatives, who are people who live at Zuni, who speak their language, to train them to deliver the Otago exercise program. And so that's what we set out to do. And so we had the Otago exercise program home delivered, and an education based using the steady educational brochures, which were also delivered in their homes. And we had an artist redraw the Otago exercise program figures, and the people loved it. And we used Falls calendars, and we had our CHRs go out around the Pueblo and take all sorts of beautiful pictures of the scenery and people baking bread and people doing pottery. And the participants loved it. They didn't want to, they said, this is my calendar now. You can take pictures and get your data, but no, they loved their calendars. And so the funding was also interesting in that we convinced it's a minority institute at the NIH that the funding needed to go to the tribe, that only some of the funding would come to fund the researchers, but the rest of the funding would go to the tribe so that they could organize and hire the community health representatives to deliver this program. And so that's how the funding went. So they got quite a lot of funding to do that, which was fabulous because it worked really well. And the people who were screened, and this picture here is some of the CHRs at a community event in Albuquerque. So they came down to Albuquerque from Zuni, and we did, there was a big falls prevention event at the Albuquerque Biopark. So we set up a stand and they got to practice doing this before they actually started doing the screening on the people. And we used the primary outcomes of the Berg Balance Scale, timed up and go, and 30-second chair stand as our primary outcomes. We weren't going to be powered for falls because you need about 400 people per arm to do that. And there weren't going to be enough older adults to be able to achieve that. So we also conducted pre-focus groups. So that kind of adaptation that we did, the cultural adaptation, was what people told us they wanted. So we didn't just go in and say, we're going to just do this. We consulted with the community to see what they wanted. And we also did post interviews, and it's been a strong message that they really want this to carry on. We did baseline 3, 6, 12-month follow-ups. We had, again, that all the material was culturally adapted. All the brochures that people were using were given to the older adults in their own language, Ashibiri, which is the Zuni language. And I told you about the falls calendar, and we just finished our data collection in May of this year. And I can't give you all the results. We do have the results. We do have the abstract written up, but I can tell you that it was a positive outcome. So we're really pleased that it was effective, that having a CHR delivered Otago exercise program, and this was during COVID. So it was not an easy trial to conduct, but it was effective. And I was also pleased that the people who were randomized to the education arm also got a lot out of it. They felt like they really learned a lot. They put out the brochures on their table so that family members could look at it and things like that. So they also got benefits out of this trial. And then one other one that we've done an adaptation, this is in New Zealand. This is called Tiriti 2, Stand Strong in Maori. And this is Katrina Bryan up in that picture up on the right. She's a Maori researcher, physiotherapist trained. And we had tried for a long time to get Maori to come to the Steady As You Go classes, and it didn't engage them at all. So Katrina approached me and said, what can we do to develop a program that will capture people? I said, well, I think you have to do it for the people, by the people. And that's what she did. So she was also approached, as we were with Zuni. This Taranga Otako is one of the marae out on the very end of the South Island. It's absolutely stunning location. That picture on the bottom with the man with the pole, which is called Araku, is the marae where they were based. And so it was physiotherapists, Maori movement experts, and falls prevention people who put this program together. It's what they call Kapapa Maori research project. So it's actually around the principles that Maori believed in. And it was led by Arunaka, which is actually kind of the business arm on the maraes. So the money went to, I said to Katrina, I said, if you get funding for this funding needs to go to the Runaka, like it was at the Zuni Pueblo. And that's what she did. And it's worked really well. This is also getting a national-wide rollout by these Runakas. And she just won an award last month for this program, which has just been fantastic. Right. So that was a fast and furious run through some of the evidence kind of based exercise classes. So we do know that these evidence-based classes are effective in improving muscle strength and balance, decreasing falls risk and incidence, and improving social contact and cognitive function. However, we know we have a challenge that people don't always engage. As much as they know that these work, we still have low rates of participation, not only in Canada, US, all over the world. It seems to be an issue. Although when I saw the data on this for your muscle bone strengthening, I thought 42%, that's pretty darn good compared. So you're doing well in that. So I think you can only build on that. And I believe that your structured classes such as the DuraGym and then following on by FIBA Frail will help people to learn exercise safely and effectively and give them the self-efficacy, the confidence to go on and continue exercising on their own afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Debra. We have time for questions. Any questions? Yeah, Ruby?
Thank you for the talk. In those who fall, God forbid, do you have data on their outcomes? They have less severe injury, less hospitalization, less death.
And people who fall.
For those who fall.
Would you please repeat the question for the
Yes.
people online?
Oh, yes, I'll repeat the question. Sorry, we have people online as well. So the question was, if I understand, so for people who have fallen, do they have better outcomes? I see what you're saying. Okay, that's an interesting question, because one of the studies that I was looking at was the one with the 207 participants that we looked at long-term participation. Another part of that was we looked at injurious falls, even though we weren't really statistically powered to look at that. And we had the same result. We had people who fell in that 12-month follow-up, and we had people who fractured an arm or bruised a hand. We didn't have one hip fracture. That got my attention as well. I thought, okay. And we have heard anecdotally from people who take particularly the Steady As You Go program, where you get sustained kind of activity, and you also get this falls prevention message. And people say, oh, I think about how I walk. I think about making sure I don't scuff my toes along and trip on things. I walk heel to toe. I walk more upright. I look straight ahead. I don't look down at my feet. So it could be that these are kind of flow-on effects that happen from being in these programs.
Any other questions? I don't know if we have any. I cannot see if.
We're good for online.
Yeah, Dr. Berman.
Thank you very much for that talk. What are the challenges for generalizing, from a population point of view, these very intense local programs?
So the question was, how do you generalize these programs? And I think we don't really. I mean, I think they do need to be modified to fit the groups that you're working with. So you can take the same principles, but as we did with the 382, same principles, but very different exercises. So same amount of standing, same amount of balance, but letting people do exercises. And we're in the midst of doing some research on these exercises. Same with Steady As You Go, same exercises using that. But when we applied it to the Zuni community, we said, do you want to do this? And they said, yes. But there were some things that were a little bit different. They wanted to have people who spoke their language come and deliver it. So I think you can generalize it in a broad sense, but I think you also need to make it very culturally specific to the groups that you're dealing with. That would be my thoughts on it.
Microphone, so you don't have to repeat that.
I wish I could answer that because we've had so few men in these programs. So that has been a challenge. When I first started working with Steady As You Go, we had male peer leaders, and there were many more men who came. And mostly when the men came, they came because their wives dragged them along to come. But yes, this is a big area that we have a big gap in knowledge is what happens in the outcomes in men. So please do some research on that.
Happened and if it happened um, in your program, but let's say they had the opportunity to have one of the kinesiologists or someone from their group given the exercise and then they stop. Do you have data on people if they carry doing exercise by their own or they just stop because the group stopped?
I think that's a great question because, yeah, we've had only a handful of the Steady As You Go classes ever stop. They've all carried on, which is pretty phenomenal. What happened during COVID, I can tell you that because we did do some research after COVID to find out what happened to these groups, these socially connected, these really strong bonds between these people, what happened when they couldn't get together. So we trained a group at the University of Otago of sixth-year medical students to do qualitative research because I said, you already interview patients. You can certainly be trained to interview study participants. And they did a brilliant job going in and actually recruiting and interviewing people who had been through COVID and had their classes stopped. And they took it upon themselves. Sometimes it was a peer leader who said, I've got a class list with phone numbers. And I'll ring around and see if we can kind of link up people over the phone or over Zoom. We had one group that said, well, we have a fence between us, so we'll just talk to each other across the fence and do our exercises. So they carried on doing their exercises as the best as they could, despite the kind of the challenges they had to do that. So I would say once you get people really tightly coalesced with each other like we do with the Steady As You Go, and most people will say that that's what they want. And even the Zuni program, which went for, well, each group went for a year, there was a strong message that we got that we want this to continue. And so they've taken it upon themselves to do the exercises, the tests, the sit to stand, timed walking, the bird balance. They're doing that as exercise now until we can get things going.
Debra will be with us during the launch of the DuraGym, so I'm sure you will have the opportunity to interact with her and ask more questions and understand better about the program. And I just want to make two comments. Every list I knew that I was going to miss some people, but I just want regarding the acknowledgement and thanking. I would like to thank the leaders of our directorate, Tonu Nguyen and Caroline, for their support to C'est Durable, and also the SAPAC team, who is being very, very involved in the development of this program, and I'm very supportive. With the, I also made a mistake on your primary affiliation with the School of Physical Therapy. Is that correct? Yes, not with the School of Medicine, with both. Yeah, with both. Okay, so it was a part. So with this, we would like to give Debra a token of appreciation. Yeah, you can. The plane you can put there.
We'll tell you what to do on the plane. So there is this on the base with your name on it.
So this, yes.
To represent the indigenous group as well.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Okay, so thank you very much. So with this, we are going downstairs to the geriatrics clinics. I don't know how to explain how to get there. Is anybody able? Yeah, you can follow. There will be people who you can follow.
Follow us.
And it's on the, for those of you who get lost or maybe get out, it's at the entrance on the Legaré Street. And so
lots of food and lots of wine waiting.